Serious, Reddit, what do you think is the creepiest/most disturbing unsolved mystery ever? The Ibadan forest of horror in Nigeria. A local taxi driver goes missing and his friends create a makeshift search party and investigate a forest. Instead of finding their friend, they find an abandoned school, or factory, that have the remnants of a hellish torture/murder, ritual killing and human trafficking. 8 survivors were rescued. Numerous body parts, rotting corpses and personal artifacts were found. The perpetrators were never found, although local politicians and ritualists were suspects. Whilst this discovery is disturbing, the mystery for me is that the original taxi driver still hasn't been found. The disappearance of Lars Mittank, a German man who went on vacation in Bulgaria in 2014. He was last seen at the airport where he was brought into a private room by airport security after his mother had called telling them her son was behaving strangely, saying there were people after him over the phone the night before. A few minutes later, he's seen bolting, and I mean full-on sprinting out of the room without his luggage. He ran out of airport, scaled the huge fences around the perimeter and was never seen again. Hundreds of witnesses, CCTV footage and a police presence, and the man still basically disappeared off the face of the earth in broad daylight. A lesser-known one that sticks with me is Selena Mays. 12 years old, 9 months pregnant, disappears from her room overnight. She didn't bring any belongings with her, and neither she or the baby have ever been found. Her dad and his family were involved with a shady church, but there's no proof they know what happened to her. The obvious theory is that her baby's father killed her and hid the body to avoid statutory rape charges, but nobody knows, or will admit to knowing, anyhow, who he was. 12 years old, 9 months pregnant by an unknown person, forced to complete the pregnancy due to the family's religion, part of a church with a particularly authoritarian leader where she was also homeschooled, disappears overnight from her family home with nothing and no disturbance. Eesh. That's a terrible story all around. Jessica Chambers. She was set on fire in her car and had gasoline poured down her throat. Paramedics found her walking down the lane on fire. The only part of her body that wasn't burned was the bottom of her feet. She did not survive. Police found a suspect but did not have enough evidence to charge him. Paramedics were so traumatized by what they saw, they had to go through therapy, and broke down on stage during interviews. She tried to name her attacker, but her throat was so destroyed, she couldn't be understood. As a diver, I find the disappearance of Ben McDaniels to be super interesting. They say he went into a cave and never came out, but some of the world's top cave divers looked for him and never found a body. The only evidence that he went diving were staged gas bottles, but they were filled with normal air, not any sort of mixture or anything. The owner of Vortex Springs, where Ben went missing, also died mysteriously the year after. The murder of Lindsay Buziak, a case close to home for me that I don't see mentioned as much as it should. A relatively junior realtor in Victoria, British Columbia, is showing a luxury home to some clients and the clients murdered her. The clients, a man and a woman, cold called her saying they needed to find something to buy ASAP. She was apprehensive of showing the property by herself and asked that her boyfriend come or wait outside or something. Turns out the boyfriend was running late and arrived around as the murder just occurred, but I don't believe he saw anything as the suspects fled through the back door. It's believed that she was the victim of a professional hit for some unknown reason. Also, the cell phone that was used to contact her was purchased by someone with an alias in Vancouver 6 or so months prior and was only ever used to contact her. Las Cruces Bowling Alley Massacre. In February 1990, in Las Cruces, New Mexico, 2 intruders entered the bowling alley through an unlocked door before opening time. The cook, Ida Algeen, was forced by one gunman to go to the office where Stephanie Senek, her 12-year-old daughter Melissa Repass, and Melissa's 13-year-old friend Amy Hauser were being held by the other gunman. The women and girls were forced to lie on the ground while the gunman stole $4.5K from a safe. The alley's pin mechanic, Steve Terron, arrived at the alley with his daughters, 6-year-old Paula and 2-year-old Valerie, who he'd been unable to find a babysitter for. The gunman then shot everyone. The gunman haphazardly set fire to the office, but it didn't burn much. After they left, 12-year-old Melissa was able to call the police despite being shot 5 times. She and the cook would survive their wounds. Melissa's mother, Stephanie Senek, would initially survive, but would succumb to complications 9 years later. 2-year-old Valerie would survive long enough to be taken to the hospital, but died there. The gunmen have never been identified. After the incident, Stephanie Senek's father, Ronald Senek, who I believe owned the bowling alley and was out of state at the time of the killings, didn't cooperate with authorities. Some believe that the killings might have been a targeted hit in retaliation against Ronald for something he did. Timothy Pittson. A kid who was taken from school by his mother, went to a zoo, a water park and all those fun places a kid would love, and then went missing after his mother killed herself in response to a rocky marriage. She left a suicide note saying sorry and that Timothy would be safe but never found. Pretty sad considering that the father still believes he's out there, but I'm betting he's dead. Lived close to where it happened too, but not when it initially happened. In 1969, a student was killed in the stacks of the library at my old college, Penn State, and was found with a singular stab wound on her chest. It wasn't even late or anything, and while there were many suspects, no one was ever arrested for it. It's insane how someone could kill a person in broad daylight at a major university, and get away with it. It's not really anything super crazy in comparison to other stories here, it's just weird to me personally because I would always study there and I didn't find out about it until after I graduated. The case of Adam immediately came to mind, unidentified male child whose torso was discovered in the River Thames in London, United Kingdom, on September 21, 2001. Dubbed Adam by police officers, the unidentified remains belonged to a black male, around 48 years old, who had been wearing orange girls' shorts. The postmortem showed that Adam had been poisoned, his throat had been slit to drain the blood from his body, and his head and limbs had been expertly removed. Investigators believe the child was likely from southwestern Nigeria, and that several days before his murder, he was trafficked to the United Kingdom for a muddy ritual sacrifice. To date, nobody has been charged with Adam's murder, and his true identity remains unknown. The Cleveland Torso Murderer. From 1935 to 1938, there was a serial killer who chopped off the heads and appendages of 12 to 20 people and left their torsos for people to find. The famous detective Elliot Ness was on the case, and the killer taunted him by leaving 2 torsos within full view of his office. The killer was never identified, nor were the majority of the victims. My grandpa wrote a book on this case. The killer will never be identified and the victims especially. The victims seem to be mostly homeless, prostitutes etc. They weren't exactly traceable people. The killer was surgical. Like literally surgical in the cuts. Nobody will ever know who did it, but Elliot Ness was tortured with solving the case. Though, not as much as the victims were undoubtedly tortured, sadly. It'll remain an unsolved serial killer case. It's very interesting. I remember watching the Unsolved Mysteries episode about a person in 1977 who would send creepy anonymous letters to random folks in a small town. Actually threatening ones, too. The sender started by mailing up a woman and telling her, if I remember right, that they knew she was cheating on her husband with a superintendent, something she vehemently denied. Then they threatened her husband by saying he'd be in danger if he did not stop the affair. The couple decided to take it upon themselves to hunt the sender down. That ended with the husband dead in his crashed pickup truck. The sender kicked the wife while she was down by leaving threatening signs along her bus route, at least one of which had an actual booby trap on it. They found and arrested a suspect, but it's still unknown today if he's the actual sender. He denies it. The idea that somebody has been quietly studying your life just so they could begin to anonymously blackmail you, or make up a rumor to blackmail you with, is pretty damn scary. Addendum: in 2021, a forensics professional claimed that the police were right all along and the suspect who was released by then was the sender. But the massive hole in her claim is how he was still able to write letters during his time in prison. Just yesterday my colleague told me a personal account of a kidnapping of her friend. This happened when colleague and her friend were 10 years old. One day, instead of going straight home, as they usually did, they went to the store to buy some candy. When they left the store, some guy stopped them. He started talking to the friend all like, "Your dad sent me to take you home. I totally know you since you were baby. Blah blah blah." Heavily paraphrased, but you get the gist of it. So the friend got convinced that he really is there to take her home, so she agreed to go with him. This guy also offered ride to my colleague as well, but she refused, and so this guy just drives up with the friend. There was a police search and everything. 25 years has passed since then and no trace of her was ever found. Colleague thinks that he picked her friend specifically because they were athletes at the time and the school put their photos in the newspaper quite often. Boy in the Box, 1957 Philadelphia. Warning: graphic details. This story just makes me so sad and sticks out to me as a true crime junkie, especially with the recent case of a child being found in a Las Vegas suitcase that is still under investigation. Basically, a young boy whose age was estimated to be 3 to 7 years old was found in a box naked and mutilated with bruises on the side of a road in Philadelphia. It was strange because the boy appeared to have been very malnourished, but was recently groomed, haircut, fingernails all trimmed. He was covered in scars, some surgical, suggesting he had previously been taken care of. Evidence suggests he was taken care of by a possible parent/guardian before he was taken into custody of his abuser. Cause of death determined to be blunt force trauma. How anyone could do something like this is just foul and disturbing to say the very least. The worst part is, it's just a big mystery, almost nothing to go off of. There wasn't anyone matching his description reported missing. There wasn't any record of this kid, his pure existence was a mystery. Nothing came of the case, even all these years later. There were some leads but they didn't result to much, despite heavy media coverage and a search to find who this boy was. Some theories include that his parents did this to him, which would explain why he was previously in good condition, then they never reported him missing after they killed him. And back then it was easier to not have record of a child that probably or wasn't born in a hospital. That he was a victim of sex trafficking. The cleaning and grooming of him before he was dumped wasn't to pay some sort of respect to him, but to remove of evidence that might have been on his body, or any defining features like his hair. What happened to him, and who did this? Why the box? Why was he kept malnourished, but haphazardly groomed before being dumped on the side of the road? Who is he?